All right, let's dive into a really powerful parable today. It's a story that's going to challenge you to look at your inner world in a totally new light. We're calling it the alchemy of passion.
So let me start by asking you a question, and it's a bit of a provocative one. What if your most dangerous impulses, everything you've been told to fear about yourself, all those intense, chaotic drives, what if those were the very source of your greatest strengths? I mean, that's a pretty radical thought, right? But it's the absolute key that unlocks this entire story we're about to explore.
So, our story kicks off with the man. And really, he could be any of us. He's standing at a crossroads. But we're not talking about a physical place here. No, this is the landscape of his own heart, his own soul, and it's filled with this terrifying sound.
He looks inside and sees his passions as a pack of wild, howling wolves. And he's trembling. Not because there's some threat out there in the world, but because they're inside of him. They're a part of who he is. And what's his first instinct? To label them, to call them evil.
And what are these wolves exactly? Well, they're the really fundamental, primal drives we all have, right? That deep hunger for more, that raw, unfiltered anger, that powerful lust, and that wild thirst for the heights, that ambition to climb and achieve.
So what's his move? He does what so many of us are taught to do. He tries to push them down, to suppress them, to lock them up in a cage inside his conscience. But here's the thing, it just doesn't work. When you put them in exile like that, away from any light or direction, they don't just go away. Oh no. They fester. They get leaner, meaner, more vicious.
Okay, and this is where everything starts to shift. Right into the middle of this internal battle steps a figure of wisdom, Zarathustra. And he's got a completely different way of looking at all of this.
The first thing Zarathustra does is just acknowledge what's happening. He sees the guy's struggle, clear as day. He basically says, yep, you had these passions and you call them evil. There's no judgment there at all, just a simple statement of fact.
But then Zarathustra drops this bombshell, this profound secret. He explains that virtues aren't the opposite of passions. It's not about the empty cage where the wolf used to be. No. The virtue is the wolf, just transformed. Virtues actually grow out of your passions.
And this just lays bare the huge difference in thinking here. Most people think of virtue as a cage, right? A quiet life you get by just avoiding the storm. But Zarathustra's view, it's totally different. Virtue is about becoming the master of your own ship. It's not about the absence of wind. It's about learning to master that wind to sail exactly where you want to go. Okay, so if virtue actually comes from passion, then how do you do it? How does that work? This brings us right to the heart of the whole idea, the alchemy, the actual process of transformation.
And the central idea here is what you could call a personal virtue. This has nothing to do with following some dusty pre-written moral code. It's deeply individual. It's a name that only your heart can give it. It's all about taking your most intense, your darkest drive, and consciously giving it a higher purpose, a noble goal. Let's make this really concrete. Think about that biting hunger inside you. If you give it a goal, it can become a noble quest, maybe for knowledge or justice. That raw, untamed anger, it can be forged into the sharp steel of courage. And that wild lust, instead of trying to kill it, you can channel it into a powerful, creative fire. See? You don't kill the energy, you just redirect it. So why does any of this even matter? Well, according to this wisdom, this whole process is the ultimate act of self-realization. It's not about trying to squeeze yourself into a box to become someone else, some idea of a good person. It's about becoming more fully, authentically you, by bringing all the parts of yourself together. Now, Zarathustra has a really important warning here. He says, be careful. Be careful of just adopting the virtues of the crowd without thinking. Because a lot of the time, what society calls good or virtuous, well, it's really just a shared fear. A collective weakness dressed up as morality. It's about finding comfort in conformity, not building real personal strength. So the path forward, then, is all about focus. Instead of trying to juggle a bunch of small, competing virtues, the idea is to pick one great passion. Choose one of your powerful wolves. Then refine it. Give it that higher goal, and turn it into your singular joy. That joy becomes the engine that drives you toward your own unique destiny. And all of this leads us to the really beautiful and powerful endpoint of this transformation. So what's the ultimate result? What happens when you do this inner work?
This is where we get the final, really stark contrast. The person we think of as the good man might just be someone whose passions, whose inner wolves, were kind of weak to begin with. But the true creator, the artist of their own life, that's the person who takes the most dangerous part of themselves and makes it their greatest delight, their most powerful tool.
So in the end, the person who really embraces this path leaves behind that simple morality of the cage. The morality of don't do this, don't do that. They become an artist. And their medium? It's their own inner chaos. They learn to shape it, to sculpt it, to turn all those wild cries of the soul into a symphony.
And this is why the saying goes that you have to have chaos inside you. That inner chaos, that pack of howling wolves, it isn't some flaw you need to get rid of. It's a cosmic necessity. It is the raw, explosive stuff you absolutely need to give birth to something truly beautiful and new, a dancing star.
And so, as we wrap this up, I've got to turn the question back to you. If your passions are the fire, the raw energy, what's their purpose? What unique, personal virtue could you grow from them? What is the flower of your fiercest fire?